ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Kaneland District 302 Board of Education. We would like to inform all board meeting attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion. And if you'd stand with me and say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And a roll call when you're ready, please.
Mrs. Witt.
Here.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Here.
Mrs. Junk.
Here.
Mr. Carey.
Present.
Dr. Lawler.
Here.
Mr. Bankowski.
Here.
Mrs. Simmons.
Here.
With 7 members present, we do have a quorum. Do any board members want to move anything from consent to new business?
No, thank you.
Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Bankowski.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye. Motion carries 7-0. Move now to board and superintendent salutes. I'll turn it over to Dr. Layden.
Yes, thank you. Tonight we're going to start with our recognition of our winter athletic and activities. And with that, we'll start with Harder Middle School. So I don't know if it's going to be Mrs. Patterman or Mr. Faulkner. Mrs. Patterman, thank you for coming tonight.
I am Mrs. Patterman, the athletic director at the middle school. And I do just want to say thank you to Dr. Layden and the board for taking this time to recognize our athletes and the dedication and the effort that they put into their sports, because it's a lot of time and practice. We couldn't do what we do without the support of the board and the district. And that goes for everybody involved, the coaches, the parents, the board, transportation, maintenance, custodians, all the workers that work the events. They couldn't go on without all of those people. Harder had 114 athletes participate during the winter season. We had 78 participate in basketball and 36 co-ed wrestlers. So we had 40 boy basketball players, 38 girls, and 36 co-ed wrestlers. And tonight we really want to recognize a couple of our wrestlers that achieved conference championships. So that is a big achievement. So I'm going to ask Caleb and Rogan to stand. And unfortunately, Coach Bellino and Coach Monroe wanted to be here tonight, but they could not attend. So they did send a message for you and they asked me to share it. So first they started with thank you to the board for recognizing these 2 great athletes from our middle school wrestling program. We had a great season as a team and program, and these 2 have done a great job representing us and who we are as Knights this season. Our first conference champion was 7th grader Caleb Cornell. This was his first season with the Harder team. However, he adjusted quickly and enjoyed a full season of success. He entered our conference tournament with only 1 loss on the season and emerged as the 105-pound conference champ. Nice work, Caleb. Most importantly, Caleb exemplified what it means to be a Knight. Each day at practice, he was a leader through his work ethic. He led by example, never took a drill off, and made himself and everyone around him significantly better. Way to go, Caleb. Rogan O'Neill, an 8th grader, took home the championship at 155 pounds. Rogan also proved how perseverance and hard work pay off. Rogan has improved each season at Harder until capping it this year with the conference championship. Rogan succeeded at one of the toughest weight classes in the tournament and won a convincing victory in what was one of the best finals of the day. But again, his journey was just as important. Rogan came to us as a new wrestler, but quickly enrolled in our club and through hard work and practice, led our team this year. His 7th grade season was cut short by injuries, but he did not let them stop him from coming back with even more drive and determination. We can't wait to see Rogan competing for the Knights at the next level. Great job to these 2 athletes and our whole Knights wrestling program. Again, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Patterman, and congratulations to our two conference champs that are here tonight and to all of our winter athletes at Harder Middle School. And so with that, we'll transition to Kaneland High School, and I'll turn it over. And you can go ahead. And so, David, Mr. Roman won't be here.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I'm James Horn. I'm the high school principal. Spring season is synonymous with schedule change. So our athletic directors have lots of conflict during this time. So I will be representing the high school this evening. So I've got an update from Mr. Roman. We're going to begin with boys bowling. Boys bowling graduated two of the best bowlers in school history last year and begin the rebuilding process during the 22-23 school years. They had a record of 1-13 this year and ended up placing fourth in the conference out of 5 teams. A couple of players to highlight are Nick Casey and Luis Blickham, who were just 40 pins away from advancing to sectionals in the postseason. Coach Ray is very optimistic about next season since the boys are improving and a lot of the program is starting to grow. Shifting to girls bowling, they ended the season 4-8 and advanced to a sectional round for the postseason as a team for the first time in school history. And the first time in nearly 20 years, the Knight advanced a bowler to the state meet. And Coach Ponzak is excited to see what the next 2 years will bring for this very young program. So moving on to our competitive cheer and team. For the second year, both the JV and varsity competitive cheer team have competed during the winter season. This is, of course, after COVID. This season, the JV competed at 4 invitational and performed at the Interstate 8 conference competition. The team worked very hard throughout the season and accomplished small goals along the way. The coaches reported that this is a strong and dedicated group of athletes that are eager to follow in the varsity's footsteps. The varsities also competed in 4 invitationals this past winter, while also splitting time between the girls and boys basketball season on the sidelines. The varsity improved enough this season to place 3rd at the Belvedere High School Invitational. Then, just 2 weeks later, at the Interstate 8 Conference competition, varsity placed 2nd overall. As the team continued to improve, they then scored an 84.8 at the sectional meet at the IHSA State Series. While this was not high enough to get through to the state finals, they placed 9th out of 17 teams at the new high school mark for Kaneland High School. In non-athletic, looking at our Scholastic team, the KHS Scholastic Bowl lost in the Auburn regional competition this year to the host team, despite having limited members present on the day of the competition. The Knights of Kaneland took on the Knights of Auburn. They took this team down to the wire. Coach Murphy is hopeful that as the numbers continue to grow next year, and that this will start to improve as we go along. The Kaneland High School chess team, led by Mr. Dantino, had a tremendous season in the school year. They were 27-8-1 overall. They competed in the Illinois Chess Coaches Association, were the most elite teams in Illinois. The Knights would defeat Bennett Academy. They would then continue on to the playoffs, where they would win in the sectional title and advance to the IHSA state finals. The Kaneland wrestling program, under the 5th year of Coach Ken Paoli, went 23-6 overall for the 5th year in a row. The program saw an increase in participation, including an emerging number of female athletes, making history as the Knights continue to grow their girls wrestling program. The girls' basketball program, under the direction of first-year coach Brian Clayson, went 14-19 overall, ended up 8-6 in conference play, and took 4th place. They once again hosted the Hoops for Cure shootout on the first Saturday in February, with most teams performing in event history, and went on to raise $5,000 for American Cancer Society. The Knights won their first playoff game, but would fall eventually to the regional champs. The boys basketball team had a historic season, going 26-6 overall, tying the record for most games in a single season. The Knights under Coach Ernie Colomb went 14-0 in conference play, earning the 18th conference title. They would also place fourth in the Plano Christmas Classic. They would then lose in the regional final at home to an almost sold-out crowd. While the evening did not end as they had hoped, the crowd and energy have returned to the East Gym to make this the end of a historic season. And last but not least, the Kaneland Knights had just shy of 300 athletes participate during the winter season. To this date, over 600 athletes have participated thus far, and we have another 300 athletes participating in spring sports. So, promising stuff to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Horn. Please share with David Rollman a note of appreciation, and to your coaches as well. And same thing, Mrs. Patterman, with your coaches and activities directors for the winter. With that, we do have one other salute. I'll turn it over to Dr. Fuchs, and she wants to share an update.
Great, thank you. If you all remember, last Wednesday, April 5th, we woke up to some pretty nasty weather. At that time, when it started getting really bad, we had already had some Kaneland buses on the road and other buses headed out shortly thereafter. So we made a very quick decision to have the buses follow our emergency procedures, pull over, and seek shelter. One of the shout outs tonight, not only to all of our transportation bus drivers and our director and assistant, but also to Jewel Osco and Elburn. They allowed 4 buses with kids, students, high school and middle school, as well as the drivers, to come into the store and seek shelter. While they were in there, they provided them with cookies and juice boxes. And so that was very, very kind of them. So with the adults from Jewel, along with our bus drivers, all of our students felt safe in what could be considered a very scary situation. So kudos to the entire Kaneland Transportation and Jewel Osco, as well as when those kids got to school, administrators, teachers, and other staff members. Thank you. It's very good.
Thank you, Dr. Fuchs. Those were the salutes we had for tonight. Thank you.
Dr. Fuchs, any others from you?
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's okay if you were here for a salute, you don't have to wait through the board meeting.
You can go now.
They can be lengthy. This is a time when we usually
Thanks
let
for coming.
everybody go, and
Thanks for coming.
thanks,
Yeah,
congratulations again.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks for telling me. I would have forgotten, and they would have sat there. They would have been like, why are we here?
Exactly. When do we leave?
When can we go?
Thank you.
All right. All right. Move on now. So tonight's consent agenda contains the following action items. The approval of accounts payable and payroll from March 2023, the approval of a treasurer's report from March 2023, the approval of minutes of the March 13th, 2023 regular meeting, the approval of personnel, the approval of the destruction of audio recordings from closed session meetings from October 2021, the approval of the fuel bid, the approval of the summer 2023 paving work bid, the approval of the IESA membership for 2023-24, the approval of health insurance broker services 2023-24 through 2025-26, the approval of a classroom use agreement with Mid-Valley Special Education Cooperative for 2023-24, the approval of a storage use agreement with Mid-Valley Special Education Cooperative for the 2023-2024 school year. And the following informational items: the student suspension data report and the 2022 final tax extension report. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
And a roll call, please.
Mrs. Junk. Aye. Mr. Perry.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Mankowski.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. So this is our first opportunity for public comment. There's one at the beginning of the meeting and one at the end. There are others tonight because of a public hearing, but that's on a special topic. So are there, before I go into my big long spiel, I just check, we don't have anybody signed up, but is there anybody who would like to make a public comment in this first go round? Okay. Hearing none, we shall move on, and you don't have to listen to my spiel. We'll move on to new business then. The first item is the public hearing and approval of the resolution authorizing honorable reduction in force of support staff.
Yes, thank you. That comes, as you know, that comes through our HR department. And with that, I'll ask Dr. Adkins if you'd come up and
I need to call the
the
public
public hearing to order first, and then
Sorry.
Dr. Adkins will share.
Sorry. Okay, so it is 7:16, and I am calling the public hearing on the honorable reduction in force for the support personnel. I'm calling it to order now, and then we'll hand it off to Dr. Atkins.
Thank you. Annually, we go through a process to determine staffing for the coming year. As the board knows, we start with the certified staff in March, and then we move on to the classified staff in April. Just like we do with our minimum staffing plan process, the administration looks at the variety of needs of our students. And with regard to classified staff, there's typically one group, our paraprofessional group, that are highly dependent upon IEP needs and student needs with those IEPs. After auditing all of that this year, there is the need for a reduction in force due to students not needing as much adult support and adult assistance in all of our various IEPs. And before we get into the details of some of that, I just want to take a quick moment to remind the board that this is an honorable reduction. The people affected and involved are terrific employees and do a fabulous job for us. It is just the confluence of student need that is bringing us to this reduction in force. So it's important to also remember that they will have recall rights under the law for a period of 1 year. So the entirety of next year, should we have any changes to our IEP needs and require paraprofessional assistance, those people that are affected by this reduction in force would have the legal right to that position before it even gets posted or anything like that. We have had to do a reduction in force in the past for our classified staff. And we've been fortunate to be able to recall most, if not all, of those affected staff over the years. So that's definitely a good thing. So just a reminder that it's an honorable reduction in force. So after reviewing all of our IEPs, looking at placements, enrollments, registrations, because some of that is some of our need for paraprofessional supports impacted by class assignments at the high school and the middle school. We did need to reduce 7.2 FTE, and then based on how things work with seniority and part-time status within the union, we actually have 9 bodies. And if you recall, as we discussed with the minimum staffing plan process, there is a very connected but different component with the FTE and the actual people involved, because you could have part-time people making up 1 FTE. So I go through a process of working closely with Mrs. Sensor, our union president, to inform them, update them as to what's going on. And then over break, I met with the UniServe director from IEA and the union president to review it yet again. And then last week, we met with all the affected staff to go over what to expect, how recall works, how recall would work, and in what order, which is listed on that document that you have. And then because under the law, if you reduce and force more than 5 staff, you have to conduct a public hearing, which is what we're doing here, to give anybody the opportunity to speak if they so choose. And then the board can take action. And we are all set to prepared to provide all the required documentation to staff first thing in the morning.
Okay, so first we'll have the public comments, then I'll close the public hearing, and then the board will discuss at that point. Perfect. So at this time, I invite public comments on the resolution authorizing honorable reduction in force and honorable reduction in force from full to lesser part-time of specified educational support personnel. Keeping in mind that the board does not generally respond to public comments at this time, any discussion usually takes place after the hearing. And at that point, then we take the vote. So are there any public comments on this topic? Okay, hearing none, I will close the public hearing at 7:20. And board members can discuss. Question for Dr. Atkins?
So Dr. Atkins, I know in the past, you've said that because this is an honorable discharge, we do whatever we can to help support these people, especially as they're looking for new employment opportunities, right? So I want to make sure we're staying consistent with that.
Absolutely. And that was part of the conversation we had last week when we met with all the affected staff, was to let them know of those 9 people, some of them just graduated with teaching degrees, are looking for their own classroom in the fall, those kinds of things. So we absolutely want to help with those people.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
And there may be changes that require.
Yeah, so another factor to consider is that spring, we've talked about the timing of what the law requires versus the pacing of schooling. The spring is typically when annual reviews are held. I'm certain that every single principal can talk to you about 2 or 3 students who are in the caseload, or excuse me, the IEP process, which may increase our caseloads. And if any of those students result in needing adult assistance, recall will kick in and we'll start going down the list. And that happens every year, late in the year, where we've had that update, that annual review meeting for our IEP students.
Anybody else?
So they didn't do anything wrong. It just didn't work out
They're,
for the hours wise for the students.
yep, they're all great employees. We want them back.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education approves the resolution authorizing honorable reduction in force and reduction in force from full-time to lesser part-time of specified educational support personnel. I'll make that motion.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Dr. Lawler,
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky,
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt,
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Aye.
Mrs. Junk. Aye. Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins.
Thank you. Moving on to J2, which is the presentation of student handbook on first reading.
Yes, thank you. This is a 2-part topic tonight. Typically, our APs from the elementary level and either deans or principals from middle school and high school will come and share updates in the handbook. If you recall, last year was our first year that we combined our handbooks from 3 separate handbooks to one EC12 handbook. So tonight you'll see in your board packet, you have a handout that looks like this. It's 2.5 pages with just the changes that you'll also see up on the screen. And so with that, I will ask, I don't know what order you're going in as far as you handle the topics, but if you would share the highlights, we're not going to go through all 91 pages. They're just going to share, thankfully, they're just going to share the highlight and recommended changes that the board will approve on first reading, and then it'll come back and consent at the next meeting unless there are any questions.
All right,
Thank
good
you,
evening. We're the representatives of the Student Handbook Committee. I'm Kara Christensen, Assistant Principal at McDowell and John Shields Elementary School. I'll let the rest of the team introduce themselves.
I'm Alex McCartney, Assistant Principal at Blackberry Creek and John Stewart.
Hi, I'm Brian Faulkner, Principal at Harder. And Josh Roxton again, Junior High School.
Just for a little bit more background, as Dr. Layden shared, each year we review and revise and edit the student handbook. Last year there was a large overhaul where each of the levels combined into one student handbook. Feedback was asked from multiple stakeholders, including the CAC, that was parent and family and community feedback, as well as the EAC Educators Advisory Council, where we got feedback from staff and administrators. So I just wanted to share that piece where these edits came from, as well as some of them are also mandates that need to go in our handbook.
The first edit that we are suggesting is from the transportation department of students may only get on or off the bus at their assigned stop on their assigned route, that students are not permitted to ride another student's route or get on or off at a different stop. No bus notes will be accepted. Previously, bus notes were accepted for students to be able to get off at a different stop with a parent note and things like that. But just with our buses being quite crowded, and then also safety, making sure, especially for our younger students, that we know the adults who are picking them up and everything like that. That was just a suggested edit from our transportation department. Thank you.
Another suggested edit, this is
Excuse me, 1 second, Kara. Do you want to ask questions on each topic?
Please.
Okay,
Yes.
let's go ahead. Yep. Then that way you don't have to run back and forth as you're finishing
Good.
topics. Yeah.
Any questions regarding transportation change?
Yes, so prior to COVID, kids could take a note from why can't we go back to that I mean, we got a huge district and it's kind of hard for kids to socialize with each other if they live in Montgomery and Sugar Grove.
Right. I think this was just to help making sure students get home in a timely fashion, and also that safety reason. And there's a lot of students on our buses.
That wouldn't change the time. Bus route's still the same length, but
If I could add to that as well.
how did I manage to do that?
If I could add to that, Mr. Carey, the bus driver shortage, we have
Thank you, ma'am.
combined routes and moved kids and tried to make it work every day. So in many cases, we have subs, and the kids that are on the bus, there oftentimes aren't enough room to add more kids, especially on Fridays when most kids did that. And so it was a practice that we stopped during COVID, as Molly mentioned, but we haven't been able to start it back up yet in terms of having enough room on our bus routes.
I guess I don't understand because we're still running the same number of buses.
We're not.
We're not. Okay, that's
We're
what I
running
don't
less
know.
routes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep, we've packed our buses so that we have enough drivers,
okay. So
and
if we had
if we had more
Additional
drivers,
drivers.
okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
we
Just have
could
limited
use
seating.
some more still. We use subs every day for this and that. During sports seasons, we can't cover some trips. We're still in need of bus drivers,
So do we want to make that a permanent change or just until we hire?
at least for one more year.
And these changes are annually. This comes back to the board every year.
Yeah.
So Julianne, I could understand how we wouldn't want to say anybody can do this any day of the week, but this is very black and white. It's just can never happen. Is there an exception for, like, let's say I'm a single working mom and I need my son to come home to my house Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but they're going to drop off at my neighbor's down the road. They have a different stop Tuesday. Like, are
So
those
it's not that, that's not what we're talking about.
okay?
What we're talking about are play dates.
So, but
So
working around
parents,
other things
working
can happen,
parents-
just not this note.
Correct.
Okay.
Working parents that need alternate transportation on different days of the week, divorced parents, any of those, we are still
Okay.
managing all of that, and there's quite a bit. It's the play dates.
Okay.
So that Girl Scout troops like to go home with one girl on Friday, put 3 or 4 more on a bus.
Don't have enough room.
We're not doing that.
Thank you.
So how do we differentiate that? So,
We have
Let's
a
say-
form.
okay, you do, well, and that can be applied the day of. So let's say, using the working mom example, we have a working mom who at the last minute has to stay late and therefore she has to call, a neighbor a few blocks away. Can she call into the school? You guys can use discretion?
Yeah, definitely. So something like that, if that mom were to call and let us know that maybe that student rides a different route on Tuesday, Thursdays, and it's a Wednesday and they need to write that route, definitely, or letting us know if a different family member or their neighbors picking them up from the bus stop, something like that. We definitely work with families.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next two suggested revisions are state mandates, so they need to be included in our handbook. The first one is exemption from PE requirement for students who receive special education services. While this is already in our student handbook, there is a small change. Students who are eligible for special education may be excused from physical education situations if they're in grades 3 through 12. If their IEP requires that special education support and services be provided during physical education time, and previously in our handbook it said if the parent guardian agrees or the IE team makes the determination. The updated language is that part C that you'll see on the right side. So the updated part is on the left. If there's no agreement from parents or the IEP team, then the IEP team can determined to utilize that physical education time for students to receive their special education support and services if needed. Are there any questions on that specific one? Okay, the next one is suicide and depression awareness and prevention. This is an Illinois statute, and we do not currently have language for that in our student handbook, so it does need to be added. Basically, we will provide in our handbook resources and hotline phone numbers, as well as text messages, so that our students and families can access that as needed. This is also on the back of student ID cards and in planners as well. So we just wanted to make sure that we have this language in our handbook as well. Is there any questions on that one?
That's one of the things that's being monitored by the regional office in our compliance.
visit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I had 4. Bear with me. The first one, as you can see, is trading and selling items. I'll just try to summarize that. Is we do have items that are being brought to school, and we do have large amounts of money being exchanged at school. I'll give you an example. Jordans are one of them, where we see kids walking in with, Air Jordan boxes, and they're selling it for a lot of money. So we have obviously discussed with parents and students that this is inappropriate. However, we felt like there probably should be language in the handbook regarding something like that. There are other items too, but that was just my one example. So any questions?
Makes sense.
All right. The second one is food delivery, Grubhub or any type of food delivery service. We do, although we have talked numerous times that this is really disruptive, we felt like this is another area we should have in the handbook. It's not in the handbook. It is a little bit more modern. We do have a lot of students ordering food from Grubhub, and it really becomes a full-time job in the office if we have a lot of kids who are ordering. And then it also becomes pretty disruptive in the cafeteria, because if somebody orders an entire pizza, that entire table is begging and pleading to do anything to get some of that pizza. So it is a pretty large disruption, and we felt like this is something that not only should be in the handbook, but we should probably talk to kids and parents throughout the school year, especially at the beginning.
This is a K-12 handbook, correct? So we're also implementing this at the high school?
Yes.
Sure how I feel about that.
But it's tough. If, you have even 20 kids out of over 1,000 do it, it's pretty disruptive, because they all come to the office, they drop it off, and you have people coming in and out. You have secretaries trying to organize it so people don't take the wrong food order, so it gets pretty disruptive in the office.
You can talk in front of the mic, Josh. If you're going to share, please. Thank you.
We do this at the high school. We don't allow food. We've had delivery drivers upset. They're not receiving tips. Students trying to get out of class. So something
This
we
is
already do.
in place. We're just putting it on paper?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's good.
I have another question. The first part says, if a parent or guardian wants to drop off a lunch for a student, they may only bring food for their own child.
Correct.
So back in the day, on your kid's birthday, you
Yep.
would bring, McDonald's for the whole table or whatever, things like that. So who, is it the secretaries in the office that are like saying, sorry, you can only drop off? Oh, it's you.
I'm the bad guy. Yep. They come and get me and tell them.
And your counterparts at other schools would be the
Correct.
bad
Yes.
guys. Okay.
Correct.
Principals are bad guys.
I am the bad guy in this situation.
No, the principal is your pal. I know that. Okay, thanks. I just wanted to check that.
You bet. Other questions on that one? All right, so we do have, the next one is in our handbook, but we are looking to remove it because we believe that each school communicates drop-off and pickup procedures, that it is a little bit different. So I'll give Harder Middle School as an example. We worked with Sugar Grove Police. Chief Rollins asked us to find a different way for our kids to get picked up without creating such a traffic jam and creating very upset drivers. So we did change our pickup and drop-off procedures to where the students are being picked up in the afternoon at door 20, which in the handbook says that we don't allow that because that's where the buses are. We get all the kids on the buses. The parents are waiting in a line behind the buses. Once the buses are out of our parking lot, then the parents pull right in and the students come out. And it's about a 5-minute process. It's worked really well. We've gotten a lot of great feedback, but the conversation has been more of, do we really need to have a uniform practice in our handbook when all schools already at the beginning of the year send out the drop-off pickup procedure? So we were just looking to remove that. But I wanted to give you an example so you had that for your understanding. And I'll take any questions on that.
I don't know how you fix that. You know, at every school, there's, you know, that parent that, you know, there's people waiting in a line and the line moves forward and they're still waiting. And so somebody screams up from behind and pulls in and, you know, it's something you read about on Facebook all the time. I don't know.
Knock on wood, it's
How,
worked.
I don't know how it's.
Knock on wood, it's worked.
Yeah.
So it's gone really well and it's been really smooth. So.
Okay, that's good.
All right, and then finally, we felt like we needed to put it in addition with the Ignite Academy opening up in the fall, that students in grades 6 through 8 who are attending the Ignite Academy can participate in all after-school sports and activities at Harder Middle School. That's the gist of it. I'll take any questions on that one. All right. Well, thank you. I'll pass it off to the high school.
Thank you, Mr. Faulkner.
All right. I was tasked to talk about some public service acts here, one of which talks about day-long absences allowed for civic events. And the second one talks about fines or loss or damage to school property. Those fines can be waived to students who meet certain eligibility guidelines, one of which would be like an income, family income, and things like that. So.
How do they define civic events?
Civic events would be, I guess, would be any sort of a government activity. I think from the way I understood, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I think you and I would describe civic events, church, government, and we can come back and get a detailed.
I don't think church is civic.
No,
Right?
I think many times as we look through press policies, as they have these in the model handbook, what we can do is we can look through it and see how it's defined, but typically it'll have that definition that comes with it, because many of these updates are legal changes and they come through the model student handbook from the Illinois Principals Association. So what I can do is in between now and the next meeting, when the board approves it, I can share information on what that is.
Okay.
How it's defined.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Because these are all representative from the model student handbook from the Illinois Principal Association, correct?
IPA, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I have a question on the second one.
Yep.
The fines or loss, fine for loss or damage to school property are waived. That doesn't include the disciplinary aspect, does it?
No,
So if
no,
someone
just the,
intentionally damages property,
yep,
we won't fine them if they're low income, but if they meet the criteria.
right. There still would be consequences. You know, I broke a window, might not have to pay for that window, but still could serve some sort of school consequence.
Sure. Is there any other criteria beyond the income?
I think again, like Dr. Layden stated, they'll list out exactly what those requirements, what those may be. Income's the first thing that comes to mind, just because, you know, you've got free and reduced lunch for sports or for food, you've got sports, all sort of situations like that are free and reduced. So I think they're adding this to that to accommodate. Other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks. So I will entertain a motion that the Kaneland Board of Education approve on first reading the student handbook that is aligned between early childhood through 12th grade to be implemented for the 2023-24 school year.
So moved.
Second.
A roll call, please.
Mr. Vankowski.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk. Aye. Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the copier agreement.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to our student handbook review team. I
Yes.
appreciate your help and your updates tonight. So thank you. With this one, this is a topic that the Board of Education has asked for some additional information, and Dr. Fuchs has researched that and provided a little bit of that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Fuchs, and I also know that Mr. Wolf is back there if there are any questions for Tim. So Dr. Fuchs.
Thank you. At the last meeting, we talked about the renewal of the 5-year lease with Canon. At that time, the board asked questions specifically related to the cooperative purchasing agreement that Canon belongs to. It's part of that cooperative that we would benefit from if we chose to go with our 5-year lease. That partnership was established in 2018 through Omnia Partners. At that time, the DuPage County Procurement Services did an RFP for Canon. I'm sorry, not for Canon, but for multifunctional copiers, which is what we have. They had 5 vendors submit proposals. Canon, Proven IT, Xerox, Sharp, and Toshiba. They interviewed 2 of those firms, and ultimately Canon was selected as the vendor of choice. By going through that process and participating in the cooperative, other governmental units, such as Kaneland, can benefit from the cooperative pricing as well as the negotiated terms that were a part of the agreement. Some of the benefits of the negotiated terms are listed in the last sentence there. There are no documentation fees, no equipment ship-back fees at the end of the lease. There's a price lock for the term of the lease, which we're looking at 5 years. And then we do not get charged for scanned copies or help desk support. So in combination with the pricing and these terms, the board at this point has 2 choices. The first choice is the administrative recommendation, which is to renew the 5-year lease, given the pricing information provided. Or at this point, we can extend our lease, our current lease, for 1 year, and that would allow administration an appropriate amount of time to put together an RFP and go through the entire process in order to select a new copier vendor, could be Canon or different vendor, through a new 5-year lease. Sorry about my voice. In the memo, I put in there the information, the background information of how many copiers. I put the current benefits with Canon that the administration feels strongly about. And then I also put the pricing information for the 5-year lease as well as the 1-year renewal for 1 year to get us through until we go through the process. What questions do you have?
I'm not understanding something about option 2. And I'm sure it's in here, but I'm just not adding it correctly. So if I look at your option 1, the 5-year lease, it says monthly payment of $16,370. If I look at the option 2, it says monthly charge of $5,133. So something, I'm missing something.
Dr. Fuchs, is it the second half of page 4? 14,000, is that the equivalency, the 14,620?
Not sure. I'm looking at your question. The difference is, I believe, partially the lower usage that they're not going to be charging us for. Because if you'll recall, we reduced from the 1.2 million to the 800,000. And then also these machines are going to be 6 years old and they're starting to show their age. So I believe if your question is, why is it lower? It's for 1 year to get us through.
But
Is
it's-
that,
I think it's also lower because the overage amount, you have limits on what you can print.
yeah,
And for the 3760, and then you're gonna pay this overage amount for all additional copies,
which we would on the others as
I
well.
think.
Or do I have to add the monthly base overages, the 5,000 plus the lease? See, I don't,
This is this is the current one, and this is the proposed.
I'm looking at these two pages, page 4 and 5.
Yeah, I
I'm
got
looking at
5.
page-
So
So
it's like,
page 4
this
is
is,
your 5-year lease.
Right, at 16,000 a month.
That's
that's
current.
current, but this is the.
I'm sorry,
This
at
is-
14,000 a month.
Right,
Okay.
the 14,620.
And then the 1 year, this is the old one, and this is
No,
the
that-
new one. Yeah, it's current.
Service for 1 year. Okay, so it's 37 versus 14,000. I've got to be missing something. It's a $10,000 difference. Cheaper to go on a 1 year lease. So I got to be missing something.
These machines on the 5-year would be brand new.
So we're paying for machines versus not
They
paying.
would switch out the entire fleet. This would just give us 1 more year
Oh,
on our
okay,
existing
current
fleet.
things.
It would end up being like a 6-year versus the 5-year, if
Right.
I could input. We looked at the current copies and what we had on it, and during the COVID time when we were remote learning, we did have a reduced amount during that year, and I truly believe we could get another year if we choose that option. Ideally, I want to go with another 5-year agreement with Canon, but we can get by with a 1 year if that's what the board chooses, and to go.
I'm still.
So the
still
1 year
confused.
just gets us more the services, but we're not upgrading any of the systems.
No, we have the
We
exact
are
same equipment. We'll have this machine for
yeah.
1 more year.
Whereas the 5 year, we would get all new.
But we're paying, so we're basically paying for new machines for 5 years. Versus,
We would be,
Yes,
okay, so that's why there's
Yes.
a $10,000 difference between the two
but
numbers.
you'd have
Yes.
to do that. So even
Okay.
if you did the 1 year, then the next contract you did, you'd have to do the same.
So
Yes.
so I know this is a skewed way to look at it, but if we sign the lease, we save $120,000.
and we have 6-year-old machines.
But you
And
don't,
we
like the
list
next
it.
year, then you have to pay that.
Yeah.
Well, but
you start
you don't
at
have to
least.
pay it, but you don't pay it for a year, so you're not paying that 10,000 for a period of a year, which is 120,000. And then,
And we lose the
Sure.
opportunity of the current pricing for that they bid.
yeah, but that's 4.5-year-old numbers. So yes, we would lose that, but we might, if we put it out to bid, we don't know if we gain, lose, win, up, down, sideways.
So last time we discussed this, you mentioned that you had implementation of a new system that I believe was replacing Tyler, or someone took over Tyler, is that correct?
Infinite Campus.
Infinite Campus. Actually, Tyler discontinued their product. I talked to the vice president of Tyler, and he said that they were cutting basically their losses, paraphrasing, and it wasn't worth their time. And typically, a new student information system, in my eyes, takes about 2 years. They gave us 10 months, somewhere in there, 10, 11 months. We did a little bit of research. I don't know how far you want me to go into this.
No,
I could
so
talk
my-
for a
my
while
question
on it,
is-
so.
Yeah, being cognizant of that, and you mentioning that obstacle, assume we renew it for a year, and then we review this in a year.
Mhm.
Will your team?
Oh, we'll be past this. Yeah, definitely. We have to be past it this summer. I mean, we're going to start using it in summer school, and then I shouldn't say past it, but it'll be continuing throughout the year because we have to educate the teachers that are going to be using grade book functions and attendance and stuff, this fall. So it'll be a learning curve into the fall. Yeah, and secretaries and parents, and replacing your student information system is the biggest piece that we can replace in the district. If you will, it's the cornerstone of all of our data, whether it's health records or going to the state or transportation or new user accounts, everything comes from that. So that's one of the biggest tasks we could do.
Sure. I personally feel that I'd like to see numbers at some point. Obviously, it's not feasible this year, but my opinion is that
This is kind of off topic, but not, when did teacher laptops, don't we roll through that? Is that?
We did that last summer.
So we don't have another big.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
Last summer was,
thought it was-
device-wise, was busier summer in years.
Okay.
So, yeah, we've got several years on that.
That was all done through Tim when he got the big grant for $1.5 million.
Tim is very good at grants.
It is.
That lucky.
So can I, because I don't know anything, can you explain about this whole cooperative purchasing from Omnia Partners? This was done back in 2018 through DuPage. That was 2018. They've never done it again, or I guess I don't know anything about that. So can you explain what that means?
That partnership is a 5-year partnership, and it ends on September 30th, 2023. So we're just squeaking in with the pricing from 2018 that we can take advantage of. By participating in the cooperative, the pricing that they went out to bid with those 5 companies, and Canon was selected through that process. That pricing then becomes available to the other governmental units, such as Kaneland, that participate in the cooperative. And so it's a 5-year lease, because that's what they had picked. And now we have access to that information and pricing through Canon till September 30th.
Will they be going through since it's 5 years for them, are they doing the rebidding again, or?
I don't know that answer.
We could reach out to them and find out.
The reason I ask is because if we don't, like you said, it's a 5-year thing. If they've done the rebidding again and they're choosing Canon again, and we don't want to lose, but we don't know if, like I said, if this is a 5-year, agreements, and we wait for a year, but then they've done the rebidding and they've done all the legwork for us, and they have a good contract or whatever, is that something, I just don't want to lose out on that, so that's my only concern.
Well, I would assume the price in general would go up because prices just don't go down.
This is
For those
probably the
services.
first time in years or last years that technology is actually going up instead of down. If you always looked, all laptops, Chromebooks, everything has been going down. And then the last year and a half, 2 years, things started going back up. And it followed a different trend than what technology has in the last 20 years.
So the new
But
co-op
I can't say
contract
what a
costs
bid would
us
come
more.
out at,
For
But
me, this
my
is the
gut
first
feeling
time.
it would go up.
Yeah, we want a bid to make sure we're getting the best price, but if we were relying on this cooperative to do the bidding prior to this, we were kind of going through the process, but through somebody else. And so,
Which is the benefit of the cooperative.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, I wanted to do one more year because I wanted to know there was bidding going on and did we have the best price? I was thinking we were owning that to it, but if that is, we didn't even do that last time. This was through this cooperative and we relied on them, I guess I guess I know we can't push this off any further, but if they've done the bidding and they've done all the work that we're asking to do a year from now, wouldn't we trust them at this point? But not knowing that,
Well, I have to assume their lease is gonna be up and they're gonna need something,
yeah.
but to speak on their behalf without.
Yeah. So how are we choosing, if we are part of this cooperative, if we don't know they're choosing Canon, so are we choosing to not be a part of the cooperative anymore, or?
No, we're getting cooperative pricing. That's what this is. These prices represent the bid prices for Canon as a part of the cooperative.
And we can use their numbers or not. We're not bound by the cooperative to do what it says.
Correct,
that's
you can
all.
choose.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But if we do the year, then they redo the cooperative, those prices will likely go up. And if we stay with them, then our price goes up.
So with this 5-year contract, then we're locked into the previous pricing that would expire in 2013. Is that how I'm understanding it?
yes, we're locked
Okay.
into it. They have offered us that pricing for our renewal of our 5-year lease.
Okay, this is going back.
Sure.
Do you have any recollection, anyone, of, in 2018, how far off retail was were the cooperative price, was their bid?
I have no idea.
I'm sorry, I don't
I mean,
either.
Yeah.
like how much savings off?
I have no clue
I don't
for
either.
retail.
I don't.
Yeah.
Can you rephrase your question? Because I'm not sure I understand what you were asking.
Yeah. So outside the cooperative, like the cooperative got good pricing because they're gonna give it to other people, you know, I'm sure they probably gave them a low price. How much lower was it than we would have gotten on our own
Oh,
at the time?
gotcha.
Because
Well,
that would
would
be
that-
maybe indicative, you know, a percentage might be indicative of where we might
would that,
fall if we did this on our own. Because we don't know that they're gonna do another RFP. We assume they would.
wouldn't that be though, the question that you're asking, wouldn't that be what we paid in the lease versus what the cooperative bid numbers were 4.5 years ago? Isn't that?
We used the
We
cooperative
used the
then.
cooperative 4 years ago, in 2018.
Okay,
Those were the cooperative. Okay, our price was the cooperative price.
okay.
I'm just wondering how much of a deal was it?
Gotcha. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Because then, just as some, I mean, it's not, you know, set in stone, but it could give some indication on how much less, or what kind of a deal the cooperative gets. But,
I'm ready to vote.
okay, so we have two options. So, I'm gonna start with the first one, and see where we go, okay? So, at this time, I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education directs the administration to renew the 5-year lease with Canon for the district's copiers with the costs as presented.
So moved.
I'll second that. And a roll call when you're ready.
Mrs. Simmons,
Aye.
Mrs. Witt,
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Aye.
Mrs. Junk,
Aye.
Mr. Carey,
No.
Dr. Lawler,
Aye.
Mr. Mankiewicz,
Aye.
So motion carries 6-1. And we don't need to go to the next option, correct? Yes.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
Work on that. Thank you for answering our questions too. And we asked you a lot. Thanks.
Okay, moving on to J4, which is the discussion and approval of Board of Education Student Representative Program for the 2023-24 school year.
Yes, this one, I'm going to be teaming up with Lindsay Yost. So if Lindsay, if you don't mind going to the microphone, I will kind of lay out a little bit of the background, share a little bit of the process and the timeline, and then I'll let Lindsay share from a student perspective what she feels the student bodies gain from it, and then I can share what I've gained from it as a superintendent, and then at that point, if there are any board-related questions or feedback for the position, I'll allow you to ask Lindsay and I some questions at that time. This was a board directed movement where the board wanted us to look into it. We looked into it, brought it back. I brought it back to the board, and the board took action to move forward. So this is our first year of having a student ambassador as part of this process, and it started later into the school year because of the timing of it. So what we would do is, as you see, the position description, that would stay the same. The process would stay the same. The timeline is what would be different, because now we're starting in April after, if the board approves and chooses to move forward with this, we could get this started through myself and Dr. Horn, get the word out to the student body at the high school, and that way we can get our list of candidates again, and then we could start that process to be in place by the beginning of next school year. And Lindsay and I sat down, and Dr. Horn and I sat down, talked through, not together, separately, talked through the application, talked through the questions that we would ask the candidates, and we have finalized all of that. So we are ready to go should the board want to move forward with this, to have a student ambassador again for next year. So that's kind of the background, what got us to this point, and how we ended up having Lindsay for this year. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lindsay for a second. She can share a little bit of her experience, the value, the student value, and then I can talk a little bit about our value, and then the board can share feedback or ask questions.
Thank you, Dr. Layden.
Lindsay.
First of all, I just wanted to say thank you again for allowing me to be the first student representative on the Board of Education. From being in this position, I have loved learning about what the board does and seeing firsthand how the board is constantly pushing to better our district. Before being in this role, I wasn't exactly sure what a board meeting would look like or what kind of decisions were being made at these meetings. And now I can full-heartedly say that our board makes a huge difference on our schools in the most positive way. I have also learned the importance of asking questions, communication, and importantly, collaboration, so thank you for that. As a student ambassador, I took pride in giving reports to the board each meeting. Although this was as simple as just explaining the different updates on sports, clubs, etc., I truly feel that it was important and needed for the board to see the cool things that were happening in the high school and just the district in general. And also to connect you guys to what it's like for a typical student. And through this, I also felt that it was a good way to spread awareness to anyone watching on what was happening at the high school and the different things to look forward to and get involved in. Not only that, but also just bringing a lighthearted aspect to the meetings and showing the positive things that are happening in our district is extremely important to me. Also, through being the student representative, I was able to help answer questions and explain different topics involving the board to my classmates. So, for example, when the referendum was first a couple weeks ago with the referendum, the high school had posters and stuff being put up all over, kind of showing what it is and the updates that would have been made to the school. And a lot of students were very confused on what this was and what it meant for us students. And because of this, I was able to explain to the students what it was and help them to understand why this was so important, not only for us, but for the future of Kaneland Knights. And though this is just one example, I think these kind of things are extremely important for our district to have, to be able to connect this level down to the students. And so with that being said, I hope this role can continue into the following years. Thank you again, and are there any questions that me or Dr. Layden could answer?
You know what, Lindsay, I'm going to share just a couple pieces that I found valuable too, and then we'll see what questions they might have.
Go ahead.
That way
Yeah.
you don't have to go back and forth
Yeah,
either.
for sure.
One of the things that I found was two things I found most valuable. Number one was when we do the superintendent and board report, as I share those reports, I give an overview of, try to give an overview of a lot of the different things that took place. And what was really helpful was Lindsay's voice from the high school specifically to share way more and way more detail. So I think based on those reports, that could have been done a number of different ways, but it was nice to have it in person. I think the board came away with this year with a greater awareness of everything that's taking place in the school from a student perspective. And then the other piece was, as Lindsay and I shared throughout the year when we would meet to kind of talk through what she's going to talk about at each of the board meetings, one piece that was valuable for me was to hear when she was having conversation with students on whether it was the referendum, on board, her position itself, and how the board makes decisions. So some of the conversation going back and forth from Lindsay to students and from students to Lindsay back to me, not teaching anymore, not having that direct communication with students as much. This was a way for me to have some connection back to students in a positive manner again. So those were a couple of things that I found positive. And then the other thing we would try to do, or I will try to do, if the board does move forward with this again for next year, is coming up with a way to have more interaction. I apologize, Lindsay didn't necessarily have the opportunity, but as we know this role is taking place over the summer, as we plan board topics and next steps, find out which things that Lindsay, of course, wouldn't be a voting member, nor would her replacement ever being a voting member, but are there any of these topics that we could potentially have the student report out on? So as I finalize the agenda and we look at different topics, maybe talk and ensure that on certain topics, maybe have the student voice on various topics that directly impact the students, not on necessarily how many buses we're going to buy, those kinds of things, but on stuff that is student related, the student handbook piece, some of those things where the student voice is needed. I can do a better job of incorporating the student ambassador into that role.
I won't be here, so I'll defer to you guys, but like when we were talking about the press policy about what, or handbook policy of Uber Eats and all that stuff.
Yep.
It felt like I should ask her a question, but then
Yes.
it wasn't that means of, we haven't really incorporated that interaction. So if you keep the position, I would recommend adding more interaction.
We'll do that. And that was part of the challenge when Lindsay was when Lindsay first started, was not putting her in a difficult spot when she was new and not having a microphone, those things. So wanted to make sure that she felt comfortable in the transition. And those could have been things maybe from January on we could have, but that is a voice that I think we'll try to incorporate and make sure that the board knows on which topics that please feel free to ask our student ambassador.
So now at student council, have they seen, like, now that they've seen you do it, are their kids interested or asking about it?
And I've talked to Dr. Layden about this. Not only do I think I think every kid in student council is perfectly fit for the role. I mean, it's a great group of students, but also in other clubs such as Key Club, class presidents, you know, representatives just from each grade, I think we could broaden that. And I've talked to him about that, just opening it up to a bigger group of kids. But yes, for sure, I think there's interest.
Have you received input from any of the middle school students in groups or elementary schools at all, or just strictly from the high school?
Strictly from the high school, pretty much. I mean, I know a lot of, I have a younger sibling, and so I get stuff from that, and if there is something big going on, I try to report about it, but it's mainly just the high school, yeah.
That was going to be my question too. I was going to say it might be beneficial if somehow to expand it, there was some kind of, you know, I don't know, a discussion with the principal of the elementary schools or somebody, or just in case there were things that could be reported out for that as well.
Okay.
So in your description, it says be involved in the student council. Are we keeping that based off of like what Lindsay just said? That
No, one of the things I wanted to share also was, similarly active. So there could be somebody from a Key Club or somebody that's a class officer or something else who's not on that. So that's what we used initially, but based on, I would hate for it to not have a student council member not apply, and then that way, if we're stuck to just student council, then we might be without, or we have somebody who's more appropriate or a better fit that's outside of it. So as long as it's similarly active with the same types of backgrounds and experiences and connection to the student body, I recommend that we expand it past just student council.
Well, thank you for being the first
Yeah.
and sharing the voice, because there's always got to be the first one. And so now the rest of the students have seen you, and you've been a really good role model to them. So we appreciate you and everything you've done.
Yeah, thank you guys so much as well, like I said.
Yeah, I was gonna add to that. So I have some feedback about the role, and I have some feedback just for you. So
Okay.
I think the role, I think it's been a very beneficial thing to have. I enjoy having you here. I think having a student voice, what Dr. Layden said, is really important. One, you prioritize things that maybe we wouldn't prioritize because we've been so removed from some of this stuff, right? So we hear things that you think is important that maybe isn't on our forethought, right? So I think that's important. Two, I think that I assumed that we would learn things from you. Like I assumed that part of this process. I didn't realize how much you would learn also about like the board itself. I think that's really valuable, and I think that's great to share with the students. I'm really excited to hear about this discussions that you're having about like referendums and things like that's kind of a piece of this, right? Like being engaged in that civic kind of piece. So I think that's great. So that's from the role standpoint. Now from your standpoint, I have been thoroughly impressed week after week that you come up here, you don't have the jitters, you're not stumbling with your words, you speak better than, half the grown-ups that come, right? So I've been very impressed by that. Right?
Thank you, I
And I
appreciate
think
that.
you've set that bar really high, which I'm appreciative for. If we do carry this forward, I hope that we can continue to have students that do rise to that challenge of being able to speak in public and being engaged in civic life, right? These are really great things. So thank you personally for that.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet.
I'd like to echo Aaron's statement in that I've been amazed by your confidence and your ability to relay stuff. Even me first getting on, I was nervous, initially. You stepped in like it was natural for you. So
Thank you, yeah.
We appreciate everything you've done. I have a quick question for Dr. Layden. Just at a high level, I don't mean to draw this out, but the selection process, if you could just summarize how that works, assuming you have multiple students attempting to obtain this role.
Yeah, they're in the process, they have to fill an application, and as part of the application, they share why they're interested. They also have to get 2 letters of recommendations from other teachers that are supporting them. And then at that point, Dr. Horn, one board member, board president, I think it says in there, the board president, Dr. Horn, myself, and David Rollman, 2 of those 4 people would meet to review those and then interview the candidates. So we would determine that process as part of it once we compile the applications that would be due April 21st. Other questions or feedback?
No, just to that point, you've represented the student voice very, very well.
Thank you.
With a maturity and a composure beyond your years. You're
Thank
going to
you.
be very successful.
Thank you. I appreciate that, guys. Thank you very much.
And you made our meetings more fun.
Yes. Yes.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Any other procedural questions or questions for Dr. Layden on the position? Okay, if not, I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education approves the student representative program for the 2023-24 school year.
So moved.
Second.
After you sort that out, I'll have a roll call.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Mankowski.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. All right, we're now at J5, which is the approval of policies from press on first reading.
Yes, thank you. This was perfect timing. At the last board meeting that we had talked about having discussion on whether to extend the term of office for the president and vice president from 1 year to 2 years, and I shared that I would bring back that policy. This is that policy, but then the very next day we got the entire press packet and this was included in it. So it was, I guess, serendipitous that it was meant to be and for us to talk about. And so for the first one, as I shared in the weekly update, there's about 9 or 10 policies. There is this one that was going to require either action or conversation for the board to determine if the board wants to shift that to 2 years for the president and vice president, whereas the secretary and treasurer have been Julie and Julie Ann, makes it very easy that way, Julie and Julie Ann, and I would recommend continuing that moving forward, but for the president and the vice president, I know the board wanted to have some discussion on that, and again, this is again a 2-step process. Today, the board has discussion on some of these policies, approves them on first reading, and then it would come back on consent at the next meeting based on any other feedback that might be needed. So discussion on at least on this one anyhow, the only thing that needs any conversation would be the consideration for moving the president and vice president from 1 year terms to 2 year terms.
So it is somewhat disruptive every year. To have to scramble and kind of figure out, so just the procedure, since I've been on the board, is that the board president pretty much, asks people, is anybody interested in any position, and then we kind of, it's always kind of fallen into place. There's never been any real direct, like 3 people want to be president or anything like that. It's usually been pretty well set out before the meeting. Wouldn't have to be, but I think there are pros and cons to the 2 year. One of them is it takes for a new president, it takes a year, to even get it going and get in the groove and in kind of in sync with it. And then just as you're getting used to it, then there's this other thing, and then there's some anxiety with it, if like I said, we've always just, it's been pretty smooth, but it, I guess it, it could at some point be, something that more than one person wants. But somebody brought up, and I don't know if it was Dr. Lawler, sorry, or maybe it was Ms. Junk, I'm not sure, that said, it might be better to wait, like to do it for 1 year now, and then do it 2 years. Well, it was you?
Yeah, so
Because so that you don't have new.
my thought behind that was, as becoming a new board member, you really don't know what's going on. I mean, everybody has the best, you're kind of lost for a year.
Mhm.
So walking into your first meeting and having to vote for the new president you're just gonna, so I would like to see it if it was up to me, offset so that the election of the offices are in the off year from the election of the board members, so that they,
But the only problem with that is that the president may be one of those people and may lose an election, may choose not to be reelected, and then you're stuck because they're in the middle of a term.
absolutely right.
So these are just some things that are.
I think that's a big point though, Ryan. There's already a challenge of learning the ropes as it is, right? And then, right, this is, I can't remember how many years I've been on it, 7, whatever it is. Every year something new comes up. I'm like, oh, well, I just learned how to do that now. You know what I mean? So there's just always, so much flux and so much change. And I think the change of the guard doesn't help that. I think it adds to the confusion.
I definitely agree. It just doesn't make sense, period, to have brand new board members then vote on a president or vice president when they,
You have no idea who they are.
right, sure, yes, whatever you tell me. You know, but I do, obviously, you could end up having to do a couple 1-year terms if somebody doesn't run again, doesn't get reelected, whatever that looks like. But it would also be like, if you just had a board member drop off 2 years early, you can put them in that cycle.
So playing a bit of devil's advocate to that and bringing up the flip side of that, if you have a majority of board members turn over,
Like this election.
and perhaps the people coming in, you know, really, I mean, they have as much right to be nominated for president and the
But they will, the
Right.
year after they are there. I mean,
yeah.
But terms are, right now, all the terms are 4, right? We're back to whole terms again?
Yes.
Right, yes, we're back to whole terms.
Yes.
So, yeah. Unless they leave.
Unless someone steps off.
Right.
So anyone who would be elected now as president and vice president, unless there was, you know, and you could always have people who have a change in their life situation and may want to resign, but otherwise, everybody that would be seated as with the new board would have at least 2 years, you know, to go. It's also a big commitment, and not knowing how much time it's going to take to be board president, I would, you know, you might be like, wow, you know, that's more than I thought, or, you know, and maybe you wouldn't want to continue again. And I mean, there would be a way to do that, I'm sure.
yeah, I see your point that there needs to be flexibility in the policy, because if Meg gets elected for 2 years and after year 1, she's like, no. There needs to be some sort of flexibility for that person to be replaced, but I still kind of, the general concept I still like of off years from consolidated elections.
Also, just to bring up, not because I anticipate this would happen, but there are ways for a board to remove someone as president if there is a good reason. You know, if the majority of the board feels, you know, there's malfeasance or incompetence or whatever. I think there are ways for that to happen. Haven't ever had to look them up. So
Bob,
I'm
you're gonna be
done.
around that
I'm
meeting.
done in a couple of
Yeah.
weeks. So
Yeah,
I think this shouldn't be the discussion that I should. I mean, I think those who are coming back should be weighing in on it more.
I guess we were looking
Where are
more
all
for
of
your
you
perspective, because
going?
you
I'm
have
not
done it
gonna
long
be
enough.
Right.
So your voice does weigh a lot for us, because we're, you know, we are, the rest of us, except for Aaron, you know, the rest of us are still just 2 years right now. So we're still, like Dr. Liller said, we're still learning as we're going here. So every
And
every meeting there's something new.
You know,
so.
who would have guessed? I mean, you know, certainly during COVID, it was a whole other job.
Yeah.
And it, you know, answering all the emails, and meeting with people, you know, sometimes, you know, there were a couple private meetings and things like that. It can be difficult with a full-time job. It was easier for me to be president when I because I've done both when I was part-time and when I was full-time. And, you know, it's part of the reason I'm stepping off the board is because my job is more demanding now. And
you've put in just a couple of years.
just a couple. So,
I'm torn, because I think there's benefit to 2-year terms. I think that creates more stability. The other part of me, though, is we have 4 brand new board members, well, 3.5, right? If you're coming back. So, but yeah, because you're full term.
Yeah,
now,
full
right?
term.
Yeah. But we have new board members coming in, and they may have a different vision and direction for the board, likely so, right? And so, we might vote tonight, create this 2-year thing. And maybe that's not the vision that board wants, right? Although they could undo it, right?
They
So
could,
they
yeah.
can absolutely undo it.
On a motion to reconsider, we could.
Yeah.
I personally prefer 2 years
Yeah, I do.
just for the stability, the reliability, and institutional memory
Yeah, I
that
think
that
that's good too.
provides, which, you know, you and I both know that having, you know, in educational institutions,
Oh, yeah.
having certainty, yeah, you know what I'm
It's
talking
huge,
about.
it's huge.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's one of the benefits of having Teresa on the board is that she's had such a lengthy term. Right? So, no, it's not the same thing.
It's a lot.
But you do have institutional memory, and you've been
Yeah.
able to guide us through a lot of things where it's like, you could say that, but that's not what a board should do. And these are things I learned many times, and I appreciate that. Right. So yeah.
And in all fairness, if the new board, newly constituted board wants to revert it back, they have that ability.
Absolutely.
That, you know, I would say 2-year term would be preferable.
I lean that way too.
Yeah.
Now, ambitious new board members may not want to wait 2 years to, you know, have their shot at it.
That's what I was gonna clarify. I just wasn't sure what you were saying. Do you want to do a 1-year term and then start a 2-year term to offset it?
Oh, I see what you're saying. I mean, I don't know. That seems like a lot of, I don't know.
Again, then the person,
wouldn't be
could- the
opposed to
person,
that.
could- the
Yeah.
person in the middle of their term could not be reelected, might not be reelected.
Yeah. Year 1 of 2 if they're stepping off.
Yeah.
Right.
Or if, even if they're not stepping off, they don't think they're stepping off, but they
Yeah.
get voted out, you know, you don't know.
Doesn't the board have to reorganize after an election
Mhm.
anyway, since?
Yep.
I would propose a 2-year.
From now. Or
Yeah,
from-
going forward.
Starting May 8th.
from The next organizational meeting.
Which is May
of the
8th.
New board, which would be,
May 8th.
what, May 8th?
Procedurally, I forget. Do we elect the new board, or do we elect the new officers and then institute the new board, or do we institute a new board and then we elect the officers?
The
So,
board-
let's want to make sure.
The board's been
That day is
constituted.
crazy.
Yeah.
We're in the
You sit
process of-
there and then you come
Yeah.
over here. Like,
Yeah.
you're like,
We're in the process of reviewing that, and I'll have an update for the board.
Oh, okay.
Because it's 2 different meetings. There's a short meeting where the current board adjourns, signee day, which means this board is now done. Then 3 board members leave, 3 new board members come on. We start the new board meeting, and then we go through that process. So it's a 2-part meeting, and Teresa and I were talking about that beforehand, and we have to review exactly what's in policy and what's in statute, because there's the oath, there's the canvassing of the votes to say it's final. Those things need to take place we were debating the first one, the second
Yeah.
one, so we have to go through that process, and I'll review that.
Because the president normally swears in or does, you know,
Yes.
gives the oath. But if they haven't taken the oath, they can't vote in a new president. So we need to check that exactly how that works. He was saying maybe before we kill off our board, we read them the oath, but I think but then
How about you
then we
just
end
step
up
down
with
as
10 board
president right
members, you know, for a brief instance. And I'm a rules person, so I kind of really want to do it, you know.
And we will.
We're going to do it the right way. We just
And we will.
aren't sure when, because Dr. Layden becomes the president
Yeah,
pro
he's
tem
Pro tem.
All right.
until,
To take the
and
vote.
usually to give the canvassing information and then to take the nominations for president. And once the president is elected, he turns it over. I would encourage everybody that's staying to know, know what you're doing. If you want to be president, let your other people that are coming back know, or if you want to be vice president or whatever, know what's going on, because, if it's not usually, well, I haven't ever known it in my 3 terms for it to be unscripted. Not scripted. Okay, that's a bad word. People, it can be awkward.
Well, we don't come in with like buttons, vote for Eric. right?
No,
We didn't do that.
no. Normally the people, you would have your support structure lined up so that it's not like, so people aren't, so it isn't awkward and people don't feel bad.
Yes.
Because somebody could say, I nominate, one person could say, I nominate so-and-so for president, and then you sit there and nobody seconds it.
That's what happened to me my first year.
did have that.
My first year on the board,
Sit there.
I sat down and somebody asked me to nominate him. I'm like, oh, sure, I don't care. No one seconded, and we all just kind of stared at each other. It was kind of awkward. So
I was there for
Yeah,
that.
that was a trap.
I really didn't.
I didn't know.
Seeing us taking advantage of the new guy.
So we have 2 returning board members for 2 years. Aaron?
Yes.
2 years. Adam?
That's a question, right?
Yeah, there's a question. Yeah, I just,
Yeah,
for the
I
4
am.
that are returning, because I think the 3 are deferring to some degree to the 4, correct?
Yes.
Yes, we are.
I abstained.
I see the pros and cons to both sides. But at the end of the day, I agree that if they're going to be in the role, a year is a little too short of a time for them to fully come up to speed. That being said, if we do decide to go in the direction that was mentioned, I don't think going off cycle is the correct way to do it. So, I don't like the option of 1 year and then switch to 2 years, because then we could have a change. So I support it.
Bob said the same thing.
Yes. Yeah, 2 years is good with me.
So then I will update this policy to bring back under president and vice president to change it from 1 year to 2 years. Okay? All right, thank you. Yes, yeah, Jennifer was in too.
Yeah, it's okay.
So-
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yep,
Yeah.
Do we
yep.
have to vote?
We vote all of them at the end
Okay.
to approve, and so that's how that one will be amended. So when the vote at the end is to approve them as
I forgot. there was a
presented,
second.
it'll change, so the presented is now 2.
Yeah, I just forgot
Okay.
there was a second one.
Yep.
That we needed to discuss.
Yep. I'm sure changing it from 1 year to 2
Oh, okay.
years as discussed, not necessarily presented, but as discussed and decided upon. You will see in the next several, there's probably 5 of them that related to employment history review, the part that was in green and highlighted. That is new, and that's a new law as of July 1. So that is something that our district, as again, you saw it over and over again, we really don't have purview over that. That is a new law. We will start that. That will come through our HR department. So any of those, so the second, so 460, 530, 590, 525, and 150. So the next 5 were all related to Faith's Law, and the Employment History Review. Did any of you have questions on that one? Or on those?
You said 3, 5.
590, yes. Yes. So then the next one would be 5260, which is student teachers, which is also the same. So it will be our recommendation. It says we have the choice whether to do that or not, but for safety and security of our students, it will be our recommendation to have our student teachers also follow that. School wellness. That's a legal update. It's a legal reference update, so I have no choice on that one. It's just giving the update on the last page, on page 26. Accelerated placement program, that is a change which requires us by fall of 2023 to have a procedure in place to make sure we're identifying all students based on state standards, based on their work in language arts, mathematics, or science, on state assessments that have been administered. And so this is what the high school is working on. As I talked with Dr. Horn and Mr. Raleigh about this, they are working on that process so that there is a systemic procedure in place that when students score on respective areas, respective tests, that right away would trigger a flag to say that that student has met the requirements and could be considered for accelerated or advanced placement coursework. So rather than, I think what it's doing is it's taking out the human gatekeeping process to a degree, where we have said, well, that's not this kind of a student, that's not that kind of a student. It's going to rest more on the scores. Now, every student's not going to be required to go into it. If they have a certain test score or test scores, the family can still consider it. And if they have multiple in which they would possibly qualify for, they don't have to take any or all of those as they consider it.
So are we looking at the whole, because we have kind of a two-pronged approach a little bit to the accelerated placement at the high school. We have AP classes, you know, that students, you know, they'll prerequisites and usually an okay from it, the instructor or something like that. And then there's enhanced classes. There's a lot of discussion whether or not those enhanced classes should be weighted differently than normal classes. That's some frustration I've heard from high school parents. You may know better. You know, like if you're in enhanced English, you know, and you get a 4, should it just be a 4 like the regular English class, even though you've done harder work? I don't know if this is accurate, but I've heard that the other area schools have their enhanced program is weighted. I don't know if that's true.
Okay.
Might be a rumor. But anyway, I just was wondering, you know, you say they'll be recognized to go into something. Which one is it? Is it all of it? Is it?
That, Dr. Horn, do you mind going to the microphone for 1 second? I know I'm putting you on the spot because it's a
Or
work in,
if it's all to be determined,
it's a work
that's
in
great.
progress, and a work in progress is a fine answer, but I didn't know if there was anything more than a work in progress you could
Well,
share.
it was a two-part question. So one pertained to weighted grades and one pertaining to identifying students.
Right.
So the way that's kind of a bigger question. It's not actually what, and that's something we are looking at. It's not the first time I've heard that about, you know, with my transition in, about the weight that is not placed onto enhanced courses. So what's in front of you with the press update, that does pertain to honors, AP, accelerated dual credit. So a lot of that is to be determined. So to Dr. Layton's point, the PSAT, SAT suite, that does give us information on AP readiness for students, and that's particularly tied with College Board. SAT is a College Board product, as is the advanced placement. So there is data that links it. You score a certain percentage, it's likely that you're going to accelerate in an AP English class as opposed to a regular one. So how we fit and identify those enhanced, that's what we're currently working on. We've got a couple of ideas, but at this point we're not ready to present it. We do have until next November before we go into course request mode.
And do all students take the PSAT?
All students are required, yes, and that's going to be actually on Wednesday.
So,
Well, I'm sorry, PSAT 9, 10, SAT 11, seniors do not.
so freshmen take the PSAT, so
Freshmen.
we'll identify students during their freshman year.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Horn.
Yep.
Thanks, sorry.
Thanks for letting me put you on the spot too. Well, you'll never come back. The next, and we'll provide that update later in the fall, and we'll probably do that about the same time we do curriculum update, because it's usually a November, December timeframe. We can do that at the same time. The next, this one has an option, which is policy 6230, which is the library media program. This is one that does have the option, and so I'll talk.
Which page are you on of the?
29.
29.
Thank you.
29. Yep. And so there are 3 parts that are highlighted in green from the color copy. So what I'll do is I'll start with the first one. The American Library Association has what they call their Bill of Rights, and this is an option for schools to consider. And so as I did research with that, and also I've checked with Maureen, with legal counsel, Maureen Lemon, about this option in this process. And so at this time, because it's optional, and we also have our process in place for EC5 to determine what books we want in our library, which books we don't want in our library. We have that for EC5 and 612. I'm recommending to not adopt this as part of policy. We can keep this Bill of Rights from the American Libraries Association as a resource, and we can use it as we need if there's a question that's not answered through our current practices and our procedures that we use right now. So we've not used it in the past, and at this point, we would still want to be able to use what we've used to date through Dr. Mum and through Mr. Raleigh. And if it's not required as a board, sometimes we've adopted policies that are not required, but typically we would, depending on what it is, but if it's optional, we've shied away, and if we have something that has been successful, we have maintained using that. And just as the board talked about 2 years versus 1, if it's something that we find value in or need as a additional resource, is more than just an exhibit, we could always bring it back to the board to include it in policy.
So this, just so I understand, so this policy would just stop at number 6 then?
Yes. Well, it would stop at 6, and then I'm going to go into the next 2 sections, the parent and the guardian and the superintendent. But as far as the numbering piece, yes, it would stop at 6.
So the ALA Library Bill of Rights says that libraries that remove resources based on political pressure can lose funding from the state because it's the right of all the taxpayers to have
Yes.
all the resources from every side. So so that's what it is. I don't know that there is any, I mean, our school libraries don't get any additional, or it's grant money specifically, I believe, wasn't it, when I read it?
It's very, very small. Dr. Mum, you apply for the grant every year. What is that amount that we have received typically?
Based on like our September 30th count, it's about 75 cents per student. It's fluctuated anywhere from 68.
Sorry, can you go to the mic? I don't know how long you'll be talking, but I want to make sure our audience at home
The
can
per
hear.
capita grant is what we do get K-12, and it's based on our September 30th enrollment, and it's 75 cents per student typically. It has ranged anywhere from about 68 cents to 75, 76 was probably the highest I've seen it. So it's
And that's
not
specifically for the libraries.
That is for specifically
That's the
to
library's
buy
portion.
books. Yep. You can buy a small percent of it. I think about 1%, maybe 2%. From year to year, it can be purchased on book repair, like binding tape and machines. But otherwise, it has to be predominantly spent on text that will remain in the library, not even magazines.
So if we forego this option, do we still qualify for the grants?
We do. We would
do.
qualify because it really says that if in there, if our libraries were seen for removing books based on political pressure, then the state could look at that funding source being pulled. But without the Bill of Rights, two things. We aren't kind of bound to that process if you don't have that in your policy and we just use it as a resource. B, when we do go through the process at any grade level, all the years in the last 20 years since I've been here, any library objection has not removed a book fully from all library sources. It may have reassigned it to a developmental level that's different than we currently had it. At this time, we have not removed a specific title completely out based on the objections we've given. There might be reasons and rationales why books have been reviewed, but not based on the objections from a political force, a party, or a community member.
And there is a curriculum objection form, right, that they can fill out if they don't like.
Yes.
We had been using the curriculum objection form, but we have a new idea.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mum.
Thanks, sorry.
So that's the first piece. That's the option. And then the next two sections, we do have, as part of press policy for, well, actually, the first section, parents, guardians, employees, the uniform grievance procedure, that is policy 2260. We do have that. So if is the reason for an objection to take place, they can do that through the uniform grievance procedure. But what we would want to do before that, so what we would like to do is flip-flop those two paragraphs. Because right now, chronologically, the uniform grievance procedure would be the first one somebody would see, so that might be the first thing they would do. But what we would recommend first is we have a curriculum objection form that we use for the curriculum piece, but that doesn't apply to this. And then also as part of the press policy, we have an exhibit that comes with it. Sometimes some of the policies have exhibits or drafts or procedures. We do have a library media resource objection form. So that would be the first thing that a family would utilize. This is the form that came with it, and we will attach this to our procedures and policies so that if there is a library and media resource objection form, this is what the family would use, and they would do that with the school at the school site. Then if they are not, if that doesn't satisfy them based on their response, then they would utilize the uniform grievance procedure, because then that goes to cabinet and then to the Board of Education. So that would be the two-step process that we would recommend as part of this policy.
So where would there be any priority to not, for that, in this, when you get the form or whatever, if it's political pressure, because they're trying to put a policy in here that, the ALA Bill of Rights, that you shouldn't remove, they're basically saying you should not be removing things based on political pressure. Or that's one of the options.
Yeah.
So is that the lens through which that committee or whoever gets that form, would they look at that and say,
Yes.
well, that's politically motivated? So
Yes.
No.
That would be a piece of it. I don't know based on what the objection is, but that would definitely be a piece of it.
Okay.
Yes.
Because the concern is that that committee could be politically motivated in one way or another, and then we could end up with valuable resources being removed from the library.
Correct. And to date, as I've met with Dr. Mum and Mr. Raleigh on this, in at least the last 8 to 10 years, as Dr. Mum said, a book has maybe been shifted from a grade level reference to a different grade level based on the content. We have not had a book removed from any of our libraries in 10 plus years in the district. Other questions? I thought
Well,
there was something.
Yeah, I'm just thinking through it. So I think when I read this originally, when you sent it out, for some reason I was interpreting it as removing it for like the individual family. I wasn't thinking the whole district, right?
We do have.
We have a different process for that. Right?
Yes.
Like if I have an objection to this curriculum personally.
Yes.
Right. Okay. The next
Curriculum or library book. We can. I don't know, Patrick. Do you want to do this one, or Sarah? do you want to share? Do you want to share how a book can be flagged from a family because maybe a laden student might want to go look at a book or a genre, and I tell them no. How would that be labeled to make sure that that's not accessed?
Sure. So two different ways, because I believe I heard from a curricular standpoint, there is a separate curriculum objection form that a parent would fill out, and that is a little bit more in depth of learning that is happening in the classroom. And there's a few other steps that the parent fills out and submits it to Ed Service, and then we go through that form with the parent, and usually that involves an alternate either an alternate location or alternate materials to be used. But that is in a joint partnership with the parents. From a student standpoint, from the library, if that book is flagged, it is usually placed on hold temporarily for ed services, our libraries, our library secretaries to look through those, taken to some of our educator committees to look through. Does the book serve a purpose for a given unit of study curriculum? So it could support what's happening curricularly, but it's able to be accessed by all the students. So does it support curriculum? Does it support a reported standard? If there is a parent that does not want their student to access that book, we can flag it for that student, and then that student just doesn't have access to it. There are some that are not flagged, that are earmarked like young adult readers. So there are some indicators to books that are better suited for older readers, and that's typically for K-8. When it gets to high school, you don't see as many of those, but there are a way, and our librarian, they're wonderful at knowing their students, knowing the topics. They subscribe to a lot of professional services that rate them, that speak to the topics and such, to make sure that they know that these themes or these genres might not be appropriate for a younger age level.
Are we proactively making parents aware of this process? So, like, if my kid is, if they're going to discuss a topic that I do not want my kid potentially exposed to, rather than retroactively submitting this form, are parents aware that they can proactively do this? Are they made aware of sensitive topics beforehand?
That's not necessarily, because that really relies on a parent's interpretation of sensitive topics. The topics curricular that are covered are sent out through teacher communications, through a syllabus. But as far as the form that's available, that usually is reactively shared with parents once those discussions come up of my child has shared this with me, a teacher has shared this with me, and I don't want to have my student to have access to it. Those usually come through our department, and that's when we proactively reach out to the parents to talk about what those options are, but it's usually reaction to what is shared out in either a syllabus or a classroom setting.
So then as a parent, I mean, is it on us to proactively be evaluating the topics that are going on before they happen? Or how do we as a parents identify certain topics and get ahead of it?
Again, looking at it through two different lenses, I think that's a joint partnership with what's happening in the classroom. So there should be communication going out from a teacher, from the building, of what those units of study are. And those are done a few different ways. As you'll see in the coming months, we will share out what the units of study are for our science review. That curricular materials then go on public display for 30 days, and at any time a parent or a stakeholder can come in and view them, look through them, and at that time submit objections to what the potential purchases could be. So there's that curricular side of it. Through the lens of the library, I think that is a little bit more personalized to a student in their expectations at home of what that could look like, as far as the types of resources, the types of materials that may be made available in the library. But it's a little bit different between what is used as the instructional tools are vetted. And those, again, as we purchase them, those are on public display before they ever go into a classroom. The library is a little bit different because those aren't required or mandated for all students to have access to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions on library media program? Okay, thank you. And then the last one, page 31, is our community use of facilities. After reviewing this matches our current practice of groups that are allowed to use it, the order in which they're allowed to use it, which our own students, our own programming, are the priority, and that runs through a consistent building use and building request form. And as I shared, this is on first reading. So if this is approved on first reading, I did make a note to the first policy that we talked about 2 years. So on first reading is approving the fact that we moved it to 2 years in the first policy. Yep. So thank you.
Other questions, comments?
And reversing that.
Yes. Yes, that's
like
that's
the-
taken out the option and just shifting it. We can always manipulate where things fall in a policy. Yes.
Other questions? Anybody? We good?
I do. Just and it's a broad one. It's how do you determine age appropriate for a book? Because that was one of the things.
Yeah.
It just like I don't
Yeah,
want
it
my
is
third
tough.
grader reading The Catcher in the Rye.
Right. We first look at it through the lens of 3 questions, which Patrick had started to talk about. The first one, when the advisory council looks at it, we first look at our units of study. And if we're doing a unit of study around that similar content, then we know that's research-based as to be age appropriate. The second one that we look at is any specific reported standards. And is that reported standard on grade level, like right above, right below, or how many grade level reported standards is it above where they currently are at? And then we also look at the illustrations and really look at any, like messaging within illustrations or the graphic level of the illustration. You could be talking about, if you just read the words, you could not have certain content, but the way that the picture depicts it, we also look at what would be recommended as age appropriate within illustrations. And that comes out of the National Research Center for Reading and Literature, of what you should or should not see age appropriateness for illustrations. Then the final question we do ask as advisory council, and it kind of goes to the political persuasion, is there a community need? It might not be a unit of study we discuss, it might not be a reported standard per se, but our community is impacted by blank. And does that library book have a connection to a community need, but not necessarily a unit of study? And then once those questions are answered, like Patrick said, we go back to the parents and ask if we give our decision as an advisory council, and then ask if they want to take us up on the option of having their child flagged as a no checkout to that title, no checkout to our library. Some parents choose to just do public libraries and not school libraries, and that's the choice that they have.
Thank you.
Yep.
Also, some of those professional associations, like the Junior Library Guild, does give age spans for appropriateness as far as content is considered, and then books come with a Lexile level, so the difficulty of the actual reading themselves. So it gives us a little bit of a range between like K2 3 5. So there are some professional associations that go through and vet those books that do give us some of the guidelines that our libraries use.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so if my student is, I've got a little person, a kindergartner, and they, their whole class is running around in the library. They take out a book that's meant for a 5th grader and they hand it to the,
Come up flagged.
not being disparaging, but the library worker that is not a certified school librarian. Does that person know? Will they say, you cannot check this book out because it's too high a level? And
Yep.
what if the kid's at a higher level, reading level?
Yep, when we scan the barcode, it'll come up as, flagged in a certain section.
Mhm.
First, we really do, as part of the routine setting in the LRC experience, we tell them kind of where their section is, grade level wise. Of course, they do look in other sections for sure. Some, like the young adults, we can have stickers right on the spine of the book so that we can see that even before scanning it. So as they're making selection, the classroom teacher is always present, as well as the LRC assistant, to be able to make the recommendations as they're pulling and looking like, why don't you come over and check out these titles? But then when you do scan the barcode, it will come up as the kind of grade expectation or range. And if there is a question, we often don't just say no on the checkout right there unless it is flagged already that that's a title that they cannot check out or they shouldn't be checking out at all. The LRC assistant will set it aside and have a conversation with the classroom teacher. The classroom teacher then can contact the parent or say, no, this is a pre-discussed conversation that we've had. It's appropriate for them to have that title. But if it's a pretty wide span, if a kindergartner has a 4th, 5th grade intermediate level book, that'd be one they just set aside and say, I'll give it to your classroom teacher, and then they can have the conversation.
Okay.
And our middle school will flag, the Junior Library Guild will identify books as those young adult books. So like a lower age or a younger age middle school versus a higher age middle school. And they have a sticker on it that's identifiable. And our 6th grade students are, through a good portion of the year, are not able to check out those young adults until there's a little bit more information coming through based on checkout history. As our librarian learns more about those students, then there's some discussion again with the students of appropriateness. But that initial into 6th grade, they don't have, our 6th graders don't have access to those young adult books for the probably about the first semester. High school, that is a little bit different with age appropriateness. We don't have as many barriers in place for a freshman versus a senior.
Okay. And after, like, when you're talking about the checkout history and things like that, can a parent get involved in the opposite direction and say, you can let my 6th grader check out anything they want?
Probably it has not happened. It would involve definitely discussions with the parents. And again, there
are people that would say, I want my kids' hands on whatever book they want to pick out.
I think the one thing we would talk with families about, especially the way that like elementary LRC works, as they check out their books, they go sit with their peers and kind of share them amongst their peers while they're waiting for all the checkout to be completed. So I think if it was a very high level that was agreed upon, or a certain content that was agreed upon by the parent, we may consider, like then as they check that out, it's independent reading time. Maybe it's not buddy or partner while the rest are checking out, because that might be their family decision, but not the decision of their peers around them.
Makes sense. Okay, thank you.
So to summarize, if parents are concerned about what books their kids are reading, they should make it known probably ahead of time.
Yes.
And to you guys, not to the school board.
You don't want your kid reading that book, tell the teacher or the librarian.
Yes, they will flag it appropriately.
And in documentation, I think that's the benefit of that library objection form. If and when approved, it's one thing to share that with the librarian, but we have to realize they're servicing 400 or 500 kids or 1,000. Yeah, it's hard for them. A post-it came in saying, don't have my child do this, that it's got to be through a formal documented process.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions and comments.
So is everybody good? Okay, so I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve the recommended policy changes from press on first reading.
So moved.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Mankowski.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye, motion carries 7-0. Okay, that concludes new business. We'll move on to the superintendent and board report.
Yes, I have a few updates. Thank you. The first thing, if you recall, last Tuesday was our consolidated election, and 2 major topics related to Kaneland were on that. The referendum was the first one, and as you know by now, that it did not pass, and it missed by a large margin. So E.O. Sullivan, as part of their work with us, is providing or will provide an update on some of the findings, some of the voting, and potential next steps. And so we will get that update, and we will make sure we come back and share that with our Board of Education. And of course, no direction, no decision, nothing like that would take place at all, but until we bring something back to the Board of Education for potential next steps down the road. The other thing on the same day was countywide, of course, but the Board of Education election, we do have the tentative results, and those results are in. Official results, again, have to take place after the canvassing, which is April 25th. And if you recall, we used to have from April 26th to about May 2nd, when we used to be able to have to then set that meeting up, but that changed, so now it extends it out. I think it's 20 days after or something longer, so we have more time now from after the canvassing piece. So our regularly scheduled May 8th board meeting will be our reorganization of the board that takes place at that time. The next thing that we have, Facility Planning Committee meets next Tuesday on the 18th, and that's in the district office from 7 o'clock to 8:30. And we do not have a set representative, a board representative on that. So any board member that would like to attend is welcome to come, just as they are the next meeting, which is on Thursday, which is next Thursday, CAC, and as part of, let me rewind 1 second. The Facility Planning Committee, a couple of the topics we're going to discuss is number one, referendum, because we do building and planning and projects with the FPC. So we'll talk about the referendum planning, referendum projects, and then also summer projects that we'll talk about with FPC next Tuesday. Next Thursday, CAC, we will be meeting at the high school for that. We are starting with a tour of the Fox Valley Career Center. So that's the 20th, April 20th. We'll start with a Fox Valley Career Center tour. And then the other major topic that we'll do, spend time, is on the candidate profile. If you recall, we have a graduate profile and a candidate profile. The graduate profile is what we expect students to be able to know and do and to graduate. The candidate profile, we started, I think, 5 years ago, and got feedback from CAC on from a parent's perspective, what an ideal candidate for teaching and working in Kaneland should look like. We also got feedback from students. It was really interesting after Dr. Atkins went to talk to all of our students from the different grade spans, what they thought an ideal teacher would look like. So we'll do that again coming up and revamp the updated candidate profile. And Dr. Fuchs will also share an update on the 20th regarding summer projects for this upcoming summer. This Friday, we have our annual Fox Valley Career Center Jamboree. That's from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Many, if not all, of the Fox Valley Career Center programs do something special, different, above and beyond on that day. The fire science may burn something and then water it, put it out. We might use some handcuffs on the criminal justice program. The graphics class, they'll print something, they'll make t-shirts. Our nurses, they will show our nursing program. They'll go through CPR and a couple of those types of systems and different techniques that they've learned throughout the process. And again, 1 year we had a helicopter come in, so we may even have a helicopter show up. So if you see a helicopter oversight, or if you see fire out this direction on Friday, only Friday, we're okay. Any other day, please call 911. But this Friday, it's not necessary. And then also just an invite board members and or community members on Monday the 17th. We have our first Kaneland Connects commitment follow-up meeting. We're looking for students and parents primarily to come to this session to give feedback on Kaneland Connects on how it went. We'll go through each of the 5 commitments and talk about the 5 commitments that you see posted on the wall and get feedback from families on feedback in those different areas. So it's only an hour meeting. It's from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock. We'll make it quick. And part of what we have tried to do this year, we had the 5 different commitment teams, and we had some board members, family members, community members, teachers on those. So one of the things we're going to do is review the 5 commitment teams, probably collapse it into one larger commitment team, so there's fewer obligations, fewer nights to show up, and that information will follow up, and we'll look to see if we can fill out the commitment team for Kaneland Connects for next year. And those are my updates. Dr. Fuchs?
I have 2 tonight. The first one is, in addition to the CAC and FPC, the FAC is meeting Thursday night, April 13th. I also welcome you to attend, and just let me know if you need an agenda. We will meet in the district office from 7 to 8:30. Our security task force met this afternoon. We meet about 5 times a year, plus with our first responders. One of the topics that we talked about was being more proactive with regard to school safety. That took on a life of its own in terms of ideas. So we're gonna work through a lot of those ideas and see which ones we can implement. In the meantime, one of the ideas was that we probably need to consider putting an SRO here at the middle school, similar to the high school. And so I see some of you shaking your heads. We're gonna be checking into the costs associated with that and what it would look like, to do so. I think we've had a few parent phone calls, and I'll be responding to those parents later this week with some of the other information that we discussed during the meeting.
One other note, along Dr. Fuchs sharing FPC, FAC, CAC, we sent out our annual all call to the community for people that would like to serve on those committees. We are always looking to grow and increase those throughout the year as the administrative advisory committees. That meets 4 or 5 times a year. So we shared that. The applications are online, or they can print them out, turn those in, and we will continue to try to grow those, and we'll share more updates through social media and email that those are available, I think, through the second week in May. Then at that point, we'll review those and then contact families. Because sometimes a committee or a community member will put down they'd like to be on 2 or 3 of them. So then we'll usually just follow up with them and ask them which one they would be a part of, or if Dr. Fuchs and I have different committees of different levels of numbers. So if Dr. Fuchs needs them more, or if I need them more, we may point them one direction or another if they're willing to serve on either one. That way we have trying to increase and grow robust numbers at all of our committees. So thanks for the reminder, Dr. Fuchs, when you rattled off all of the ACs.
While we're
Yes.
talking about committees,
Yes.
one thing that the new board might want to consider, I think we've lost something by not having people rotate in and out of those committee meetings as an assigned thing. We used to have, it was a rotating schedule, and so I would be like at FAC 1 month and then CAC the next time, and we would rotate and then report out. It's a good thing to attend those. I mean, and then we thought, oh, we can go to any of them, and we will, but you don't, because you're not assigned. So just a bug in the air of everybody staying, that might be something you might want to discuss, because I think there was something lost there.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's it for
No,
us.
Lindsay?
Oh, I'm sorry, Lindsay, I forgot.
Sorry.
I didn't know if you guys were going to go first or if she was.
All right, just a couple updates this week. On the sports side of things, spring sports are fully in season going. So for baseball and softball, most notably, the baseball team has won against Wheaton Academy, Oak Grove, and LaSalle, Peru. And our softball team has won against West Aurora, Houston Academy, and Hampshire. And good luck to these teams as they continue to play throughout the season. And then girls soccer is also in season and off to a great start. They have won against LaSalle, Peru, Hampshire, Plainfield Central, and Sterling. And then boys track and field have also had a ton of accomplishments in these past couple weeks. They won first of 21 teams at the Lake Michigan Invitational, earned 5 medals at the Illinois Top Times meet, and then placed 3rd this past weekend at the Batavia Invitational. And then last but not least, I'm going to give a shout out to my twin brother Ethan, who represents Kaneland in men's gymnastics. This past Wednesday, he competed at Glenbard East along with around 20 other talented gymnasts, where he was able to place first on 3 of 6 events and then second on those other 3 events. And so overall, he earned 2nd place at that meet, which was a great start to his season. And then this past weekend, he also had a meet at Hinsdale North with about 100 other competitors. And this meet is classically known. They have a lot of elite gymnasts, which elite basically means that you're training at an Olympic level, which is crazy. But he was able to place top 10 on each event and then 7th overall. So yeah, just wishing him more luck. He has another meet on Wednesday, so figured I'd throw that shout out in. But and then for fine arts, this past weekend was the Wizard of Oz show held by Kaneland's Performing Arts. This was performed at the Egyptian Theater, which is really cool. I heard everyone was super excited about that. And I just wanted to say congrats to everyone involved in making it such an entertaining and great show. And then I talked about this, an event coming up. I talked about this last meeting, but the Relay for Life event, that's going to be April 28th. Once again, if you don't know what that is, it's basically a relay event where you walk the track for 24 hours straight in order to raise money for the American Cancer Society. At this event, there's going to be food trucks, games, and music, and overall going to be an extremely fun event for anyone who wants to come out and support it. And last but not least, Dr. Horn already touched on this, but this Wednesday they have PSAT and SAT for freshman, sophomore, junior. So good luck to them on that, and us seniors get to stay home, so that will be nice. That's all I've got, so thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Other board members? Okay, topics for future agendas, keeping in mind that those of us who are going to be done probably don't have time to add anything. So we should add just all sorts of things.
Well, first.
Are there any topics that anyone would like to add? This Ryan, get out your scroll. Ryan's list of grievances. Right.
It's not Festivus.
Okay, this is the second opportunity for public comment. Is anyone signed up? Okay, no one signed up, but is anyone wanting to speak in this second opportunity? Okay, seeing no one, we do have a closed session tonight to discuss under the Open Meetings Act Section 2C1. We do anticipate action after closed session, but we also anticipate that it's going to be a lengthy time period. So normally we would have the tech team stay and record when we go back, the vote when we go back into open session, but we think it's kind of cruel to ask them to stay as long as we anticipate we might be here. So so after we take the vote to go in closed session, the video will be done. However, the action will be in the minutes and the notes on the website in 24 to 48 hours. So it's still accessible, still open, but we just aren't going to require them to stay. So that being said, I will entertain a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Mankowski.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Motion carries 7-0.